intro, I just need to get this done. So, I was just playing around with the car, and I actually noticed some very, very interesting things. So, one of the issues I've typically found with a drift car is that at maximum throw like that, or even like that, or I just discovered something else interesting, is that the ball ends tend to get a bit, well, the wheel tends to get a bit loose. Now, I'm just going to swap it over to this side. What I noticed is at full extension, I'm applying a bit of pressure here, is that is actually pretty rock solid. There's a bit of wobble, and that's just due to having leverage over the rest of the shock, and the fact that shock goes up and down, but side-to-side motion is actually pretty good, and I suspect will be even better with the wheel on. And the trailing... Okay, so this bar up here is actually causing it to move more than normal, but that's also fairly rock solid. So once I secure that and tighten it all up, that should be the most solid car I've got so far. And one of the reasons I actually bought this vehicle was because of these strut arms, or these turning arms or whatever. I'm not even going to try and remember names. It's been a long 11-hour day for me, and I'm tired enough as is. But I was intrigued to see how this geometry and these levers would actually work, and it looks like it's remarkably effective. When you go to full lock, these actually seem to physically lock as well. So if I take my finger away from that and remove pressure and try and force it, you can actually feel it manually click and overcome. So given that that would be the trailing, that's probably a good thing. And on the leading, the pressure would be applying there. So I'd say there'd actually probably be very, very little force on the servo at full lock. So I'm interested to see how that works out in practice. But let's get on to the instructions. So let's swap it around and work out where we are. I think this is it. I did that. Oh, and actually that's the other thing. At full lock, these physically lock against the strut arm as well. So you could probably get another degree or two with a bit of a file. But honestly, given how parallel and how extreme that angle is, I don't know if you'd actually want it. Excuse me, I've been coughing all day. I've had a bit of a cold, so... So we popped those in. We've got the control arms on. We've done the front shocks. We partially did the servo. And the servo's sitting in there rather nicely at the moment. We have not done the servo horn. We have done the top mount here with the golden nuts. And I'm trying very, very hard to not be giggling after saying that, but... So let's work on the servo arm. So that's some magnetic body mounts, and one of my lights just went out, so let me just plug that back in. So these little lights like this are really, really awesome, but at maximum or even half brightness, you only get an hour or two of battery life out of them. But they're great. These are magnetic as well, so you can just stick them onto a wall or something. I ended up watching a lot of videos on what photographers do, and this is one of their recommendations. Well, not so much a recommendation, but this is one of the things they use. So let's just bump that up. It's actually more important on my end to have even lighting, so I get really bad or harsh shadows under the arm if I don't have this lighting on. And especially if I'm working with carbon fiber, which is black, it makes making the details out a bit more difficult. So let's dig into it. What do I need? I need the servos, and I need the screws for that. And the M214. Maybe I've got the screws in here actually. No, but I'm going to pull that out anyway so I can get rid of another bag. That's it. The main thing was I had actually had something stuck in my throat for the last couple of hours, which has been really unpleasant. But I don't think anyone really cares about that, so I'll shut up about that. So this is what happens when you take a bit of a break, is you forget what you're doing. Okay, I've got a whole lot of screws laying around, and I'm just going to assume they're M24s. So I think I forgot to seal one of my bags. So this will be for the bottom of the servo. But before we put the servo on, we have to center the servo. And after we've centered the servo, the next thing we have to do is put the servo horn on. So let's just try and locate that servo horn. And that'll be this. Now it looks like there might be two types, so I'm just going to try a test fit. That one fits perfectly, which is good. I just want to see if the other one fits. Now there's normally a difference in teeth for servo horns. Yeah, in this one it's just a size. That one doesn't actually slide on, so we just have to make sure we've got the right one. And that will stick up just like that. No, actually the other way around, because the servo needs to be orientated on the right hand side like that. Actually, I should be showing this in this mode, so like that. Now I need an adapter for that because I need to do something funny. So I need a converter like that. I need a battery pack with an XT60 like that. And I need a servo tester like that. Now you can just use your RC remote, which is what I used to do in the past. But I actually use a proper servo tester now because sometimes I do 4 or more servos simultaneously. And sometimes I need to test the performance and the current draw. And I didn't need it before, but now that I've got it, it's really, really, really handy. I was building a crawler, for example, and it was interesting to see how much power the bigger servos used and how the higher quality servos compared to the lower quality servos, the current difference. And it turns out the speed advantages I got from the larger, more professional servos was just due to the fact that they were drawing almost double the current. And if you're drawing double the current, it makes perfect sense as to why they were so much faster and responsive. Precision is slightly different, but at least speed you can just do with extra power. So if I can remember how, there we go. So what we're going to do is center it. And in fact, I mean, I haven't actually done much on this little tool. So I saw Dutch RC Adventures, which is a drone flyer guy, had one of these. And I originally got a cheaper one, but then I went to a more expensive, larger one. So that red line is actually the current draw, which is pretty awesome. I can actually put it in auto mode. If you look at the numbers down here, it will actually give you the speed. And I've got autofocus disabled, but you can see that the second line is speed and third line is count, and max is just the maximum current draw. So if I swap that to, actually I'll do that while, there we go. Maybe not. Got to remember which mode it is. Key, interval, yeah, there we go. Stage, exit, and then if I adjust the camera, video for Linux, exposure, autofocus to 10, there we go. Now I probably don't have enough light, funny enough. Oops. You can see the current is way through the roof. It's actually reading 730 milliamps. Speed is 91 or 175. Sometimes those numbers make sense, sometimes they don't. So I normally use them for relative comparisons more than anything else. It also it means if you've got multiple servos and you're comparing the speed, it's a lot easier to do. And that's what I want. Invol, key, P1. Wire that to 1500. 1501 will be fine. So that servo is now centered. So what we can do is put that in the upright position. There won't be any ambiguity there. We know that's now centered and perfect. So we can now pull the power from it. And that means even if we turn it left or right, we've already centered it. And as long as we move it up to visual vertical, it should be roughly correct. The only problem is removing this cable. I've got to be careful because it's possible to pull the end off the servo. I can't remember where I've put my tweezers. It's not in the box. Okay, well, let's be very, very, very careful here. I've destroyed more than one servo due to doing this incorrectly, so just going to apply some light pressure to either side where there's some little tabs and pull. Maybe not. The trick is not to apply force on the cables, but on the actual white connector bit. It's the only reason I don't like these smaller connectors is they're just actually pretty fragile. Yeah, in fact, oh no, I did solve those correctly. Cool. There's actually one other useful tool for doing this, and that's actually a pair of pliers, because you can pinch on either side, like so, and then just lever it up and down. Or twist it left to right. Just as long as you're not pushing too hard and squeezing the connector, because these are cutters and they will cut through plastic. Although that can also be used to grip if you're feeling very, very dangerous. There we go. Very, very useful thing to have one of these, especially if you're working on micro drift cars. So. There goes my throat again. Awesome, so now we can start attaching. First we're going to put a screw in the servo before I forget, and then just do the ball connector, which is up here. So what do they want for that? They want, that looks like an M24. Which is interesting because they use 4 M2, they're the M2.5s. It's M26. I'm going to need that ball head. Okay, so I've probably got one or two other screws here that I'm not aware of. That could be it. And we are going to fall back to our trusty cheap calipers. I really need to get a proper set of calipers that are analog, not digital ones, because I'm finding the digital ones don't have the markings on them to do sub-millimeter precision. That is about 0.5. Let's see if that actually screws in. I think that's probably going to be the important point here, because this is a significantly bigger screw than everything else so far. And in fact, now that I think about it, I should be using the screws from the servo, not the screws provided by this kit. So yep, that's going in perfectly. It doesn't have to be too tight, it's just got to be firm. There's not actually going to be a lot of force that will cause this to unscrew. It's just merely to prevent the forces pushing it out that way. So, okay, let's put the ball connector in. Now we are going to be hunting again for screw heads because I didn't make any improvement on organizing or sorting those. So let's just quickly power through them as quickly as possible. Oh, hey Cheddar Cheese, how's it going? Yeah, this build's been an interesting one. I really need to do review videos. I keep on promising people that I'll do them and just end up not having the time. And I can tell you now, I'm not going to have time going forward because I've got a Tamiya XV01 build for a rally racing car, or a rally runner where I actually run physically behind the car. And a G-made GOM rock bouncer. So they can be occupying a lot of my build time going forward. But so far I've enjoyed this build. There's been a couple of interesting things with it, where I'm sure it looks good on the CAD design, but in practice, if you go to assemble it, it's a bit difficult, and I'll point that out shortly. It's probably important to note that this is also a 1/24th scale car, which is bigger than my typical builds, which are the Mini Z size 1/28s. Okay, that's going in now. So what I do like about this build, the plastic quality is incredible. The design is rather unique and well thought out. Batteries are placed well. The motor front end is pretty awesome. What was annoying? Oh, you know what? It's in the back end. So on the back end, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that there. And I realize I should probably change the autofocus now that I'm at it. So if I go... It's going to come into focus. You see those two spaces? Here and there? Those are actually incredibly hard to put in. They were probably the most difficult part of the build. Rear differential, that's been pretty good so far. It is catching in some places, but overall it is relatively smooth. And those places are catching, they feel like if I just run the motor in for a bit, they're actually going to wear down. The trick was not to over-tighten anything. There are a couple of times I would run the motor, tighten something up, and then it wouldn't move nearly as freely. And then I just back out the screw just a quarter of a turn, and that seemed to work pretty well. But these linkages, at the beginning of the video, I was saying, I was fiddling around with this before I came on video, and these linkages and this steering setup is actually super, super solid. So I'll apply pressure there, apply pressure like that. And the front end doesn't really move. It's actually locked pretty well. A lot of the movement you're seeing is actually the verticality from the springs. So I haven't even done the best job I possibly could on this build. I still don't know what I'm going to do body-wise. I think I've been looking at some Tamiya 1/24th scales, but I'm trying to come up with something a bit unique for this build in terms of body, especially since it is going to be a bit larger than my other stuff. So the servo is done. The ball linkages have to go together. Hey Lamin, I hope I'm saying that correct. The brass differential. I can't actually remember if the differential was brass, to be honest. Or, actually maybe the brass differential was the premium, but I know there is a part here that's brass that goes to the back part. I'd be interested if you had any more details on that, Cheddar Cheese. That'd be very, very interesting. I haven't really looked into this. I'm aware of I actually tried to get the VIP version, but it was limited edition. Then I looked at it and I decided for the extra metal parts you got, I didn't really care about it that much. So, yeah, I'm not actually on Facebook, so there's a lot of information like that I don't hear, which is both good and bad. It does make things a bit more interesting. Like one of the nice things about being off Facebook is that when you go and have a conversation with someone, they've actually got things to tell you, things you haven't heard before. Whereas if you subscribe to all the same news sources, it tends to kill conversations. But that said, I am looking to possibly start up a Facebook account. Because it's really the only way to grow the channel a bit further. Although doing some more 1/10th scale stuff, which I'm planning to do with the new cars being delivered, that also has the potential to open up the channel a bit to other people. But we'll see what happens there. I think it'd be smart to get a Facebook account. I'm looking to get a business account, not a standard account. So I am planning to start manufacturing and selling these small scale chassis. So you see me doing a lot of these builds, And it's not just because I enjoy the hobby, but it's because I'm learning to design the chassis themselves. So when I'm doing these builds, I'm actually reviewing the chassis and seeing what does and doesn't work, and learning from them as best I can. So I can't actually remember how that servo attaches. Okay, so it goes through those spaces. So I think I have to loosen up this back plate a bit, just to expose all of these holes. So let's see if I can move that back now. Or is that only the center plate? Maybe it's only the center plate. Can't push that back. Why is that? Oh, maybe it was yeah, it's a tight fit, that's why. Okay, I need to remove those. So, it's interesting, I was actually I saw Atomic FR released a video just earlier about brass parts for the DRZ V2. It's very, very tempting to go ultra light, but sometimes there's reasons for going a bit heavier. And with the drift cars, I'm not sure, but I suspect that you may want to go heavier to be able to put a bit more weight on the outer tire, or when the chassis is actually twisting into a turn. But I think it'd be one of those things I'd like to get and play around with it. Like, I can understand it on the race cars, because while your car may be heavier, your CG is lower, so you can actually take the turns faster, and you can compensate with a faster motor. Because those 12,000 kVs on like the GLR are just insane. You're not going to be able to use the extra RPMs, but you can use the extra power. And so what you can do is you can just use the extra power to overcome the additional weight of the brass chassis, keep your CG lower, and take those angles, take those corners at a higher speed. Okay, so I'm finding some aspects of this interesting. Now, the aspect I'm finding most interesting is if we have a look at this, just doing a quick test fit, I'm going to put that over the top like that and push down. And then I'm going to rotate 90 degrees. That comes awfully close. I don't know if you can see it. Awfully close to the end of the motor. Not going to lie, that actually concerns me a bit. Oh, there is a motor pinion. Okay, so we'll install the motor pinion in to see how much clearance we've got there. Good. Not sure if I'm going to put any thread locker on at this stage, but... So back to my comments on this individual chassis. It suffers from a problem I don't like about a lot of these mini-sized vehicles, and one where Kyosho actually does better than most of their competition. And that's the custom stuff from Atomic and GL Racing and BM Racing all seem to like to use as many different types of screws as possible. And from a building perspective, that's actually pretty horrible. And especially to new users, there is a lot to know, and the instructions are not necessarily clear. And you can definitely simplify and make these things easier to build by just having only a handful of screws, normally no more than 3. You normally want a rounded head, or a flat, possibly a flat head, and then these chamfered screws as well. So a die-cast 1/24th. How was the weight? Actually, I was going to say, how is the weight with the die-cast 1/24th? But if you go for a brass chassis, then why wouldn't you just go for a metal body and weigh the car down that much as well? I suspect it affects the suspension in a way that's positive. I'm actually finding the drift suspension to be a bit counterintuitive to what I'm used to. I still haven't quite got in my head how all the... I was going to say the mechanicals, but how the suspension interacts and how you want it to operate. Like, I didn't think you'd necessarily want... Well, I kind of knew you wanted soft front suspension on a drift vehicle. I didn't quite realize how soft you want. Like, you want it so soft, it's almost non-existent. Oh, why is that not going on? It's never a good sign. Okay, let's just force that. Yep, that's better. Oh, so you actually ordered a BMR-X as well? Yeah, definitely send me a link. Very interested in that because that might be an option. As I said, I'm still a bit undecided about what I'm going to do in the 1/24th scale. I'm a bit spoilt for choice in the 1/28th scale. Kyosho does an excellent job of making bodies. An incredible job even. So this is just a difficult grub screw thing. So and that moves freely, so that's good. Oops. Don't ever want to over tighten grub screws because, as I found out with the WL Toys 14401, if you strip a grub screw, it becomes next to impossible to pull it out. Okay, so that's interesting. I'm going to have to move that in further. So it looks like the steering arm here does interfere with the metal gear, but I haven't pushed the metal gear all the way back and I only need 0.5 mm of clearance. So let's just try that now. The problem I have is I'm using a Ensotech motor and the entire, I don't know if you can see that, but I can actually depress it. There's a spring keeping it centered. And I don't know how I'm going to push it in further because of that. Maybe I have to pull that apart. I really don't want to though. Hey, that's a name I haven't seen in a while. How's it going? Actually, I'm getting a lot of people on here at the moment, which is kind of interesting. Maybe I need to do more streaming on the Monday. I'm actually trying to very, very rapidly... Oh, okay, that has gone back now. Perfect. Really rapidly build this just because I do have the 1/10th scale coming up and I know I'm going to be spending a lot of time building those. I'm very much looking forward to getting into rally racing. So, tell me about being... Yeah, life has been busy. It's funny though, I was saying earlier today to some people at work that everyone's been pretty down on 2020 and it's been pretty horrible. For me, 2020 has been absolutely brilliant and like a great time in my life. Being able to work from home and get stuff done. The YouTube channel taking off, which has been great. I really do have to thank BMR for that. Some of his comments really helped in getting me some channel numbers. So it's actually really, really interesting trying to balance streaming and real life commitments. I'm definitely in a better place than most people to be able to stream as much as I want. But I must admit, sometimes it is hard. I mean, at the moment, it's currently 9 o'clock at night because I didn't finish work till 7:30. I work in finance and it's daylight savings here in Sydney at the moment, and we trade the Asian markets, and so we need to provide supervision during various hours, and the Hong Kong session, for example, or more, actually the Japan session is probably more accurate one. The Japan session doesn't finish till 7:30 our time, so start at 9 and go all the way till 7:30, and that's a very, very long day. Is the rear axle of the motor exposed? I thought that too. It's not. There's actually a big cover in the way, and from memory, in fact, I can check on the 4x4 because I've got the motor. I can see the back of the motor there. No, there's a sticker over the top of it. I don't think it is. I think it's capped at the end, so you can't actually access the back of the motor. But I found if I pushed it in enough times, I was able to overcome the friction and get it back in. But I must say, I'm not happy with this design, with the steering arm and the servo being so close together. That is actually a tad bit concerning. It just clears it. But if you had a slightly longer servo, then there'd be issues. Although I made sure that this servo is the same dimensions as the one that comes with the kit. And this is just the AFRC servo that Beaver's Hobbies use. That servo and that company is absolutely awesome. Okay. So this kit has actually been a bit of a nice surprise. There are some difficult parts in assembling it. But generally there's some really, really interesting design on here. I really like this battery cage, and I've got to work out how I can use that in my own design. Yeah, I don't necessarily have an issue with that. It's just close, and it's in my mind that it's going to hit, but it looks like it's fine and there's more than enough clearance. Okay, cool, that's biting now. Okay, so let's center up the servo, and that looks generally centered already. Just going to tighten that down. Now, I'm going to actually touch on my DRZ V2 reviews, and there's a couple of reasons for this. And BMR, I hope you're watching, because I'm going to talk about some of your decisions and some of my decisions. So one of the things I've been trying to do is work out how do I recommend, what drift vehicle would I recommend for a new user? And one of those aspects is, can I build this vehicle poorly and still come out with a really, really good result? The DRZ V2, no. It requires a lot of tuning, have to get it right the first time. That's why I don't particularly like it. So that's looking good. Okay, so that is actually impacting on my vehicle. I'm going to have a look at that in a sec. So it requires a lot of tuning. It can be made into a great car. Out of the box requires a lot of effort. GLD, slightly better. This, I've been building it pretty poorly so far, but it still works fairly well. Everything's still pretty smooth. And a lot of that has to come down to the design and the steering geometry at the front. The only one I'm waiting on is the XRX from God Racing, which I believe BMR will be doing a review shortly. And I'm really glad he got a second vehicle, because I think it's a bit vain to call the DRZ V2 as the best drifting vehicle out there without having tried any of the other vehicles. That actually rubs me the wrong way on multiple occasions. But as anyone who's been following me for a while knows, I'm very, very much anti-Atomic for their customer support and for the fact that they run out of parts all the time. And that's why I can't recommend it to anyone who's new to micro drifting. Like the DRZ V2 is not bad, don't get me wrong. It's everything around it is not as good as it should be. Why won't that go any further? Is it hitting? It doesn't appear to be hitting. Or maybe it is. I think I might need to rotate that a bit more. Okay, back to looking at... Yeah, so when I saw... who was it? Garage RC selling the XRX. I immediately went to his site and tried to buy one, and then I looked at the shipping from the UK, laughed, and walked away. And it's nothing that he's done. It's just that shipping from the UK to Australia is just horribly expensive, and I was looking at a $300 shipping bill. Now, considering the car costs less than that, it's not something I was going to pursue, but luckily, being in the Asia region, ordering directly from Asia is an option for me, and incredibly cheap. So, okay, so that's starting to clear, but it is interfering with the motor. I'm very inclined to pop out the motor and then manually prop that on. So, gonna make sure these screws are tight as well before I do any of that. Chan RC is only operating off Facebook, isn't he? From memory. Part of the issue I have with this as a hobby is that so much of it happens on Facebook, and I don't actually maintain a Facebook account. So I was actually saying earlier, I'm looking at setting up a business Facebook account. The reason for business is just I get a bit of extra management features. Sorry, I really badly needed a drink. Cheddar cheese. I don't see your link, unfortunately. But yeah, Chan RC, I'm not on Facebook yet, and a lot of like all the news and breaking announcements happen on that, so I'm getting my news a bit late at the moment. Now that's interesting. At maximum extension, you can't actually force that back, but I guess that doesn't matter because that's driven by the servo. I might actually change one thing. So I actually have the servo flush with the body, and as you can see, there's a bit of a gap. What I think I might do is reverse that, so there's a bit of a gap and there's more clearance on this part here. So bear with me for a moment while I do that. But I'm getting very... So I haven't made much progress on the rally truck. Now, the rally truck is interesting because I'm getting more interested in rally, but after the rally truck, I actually want to take a look at the Mini Z buggy and redesign that chassis in carbon fiber. So Atomic, and I don't know if that's Atomic RC or a different company called Atomic in the RC space. It's a bit unclear to me at the moment. Actually used to have a carbon fiber Mini Z buggy chassis. And there's a couple of things I want to achieve by redesigning that chassis. One of them is lighter weight and strength. But I want to try and make it possible to drive the Mini Z buggy outdoors in dirt. So I'm looking at... I did some prototypes before I did the Dakar rally truck of just designing carbon fiber frames and re-engineering the Mini Z buggy. So carbon fiber and 3D printed parts, and I think that's actually doable. I've been looking at some other interesting things that haven't been done in the 1/28th scale space. One of them is using FR4, which is layered fiberglass, which is almost as strong as carbon fiber. Not a lot of people realize that. The loss in strength is not that major, but FR4 is one of the components of PCBs. So I'm trying to drive the cost of getting into this hobby down as much as possible in my designs. So the idea is that you'll get a PCB manufacturing house to print you, or to cut you a PCB in the shape of a Mini Z buggy, and they'll do all the routing and cutting and everything. Now the interesting thing about using PCB is you can put copper on it. So that allows me to do two things. One of them is it allows me to put electronics built into the frame itself, rather than a separate electronics boards. Now, of course, there's some caveats with that. The biggest caveat being twist and flex will eventually cause the components to pop off. But I have some tricks to reduce the mechanical strain across the electronics while still using the PCB as the main body of the chassis. So that's one of my big innovations so far. The other innovation is actually interesting. Copper conducts heat, as I hope everyone is aware. So what you can actually do is use the bottom of the frame itself and clad it in copper, and then use it to wick heat away from the motor and the electronics. So if you put the ESC on board and you take one of the drone controllers that operate over S-Bus or I-Bus, so allowing you to change protocols quite easily, you get this nice... and you put the ESC on the actual board itself, you can actually use the PCB and the board to drive higher powers through the entire chassis and keep everything cool. So kind of crazy, that. Oh, why won't you go in? And like it drives the costs down like crazy. You're essentially outsourcing your manufacturing. They'll even solder the parts on, and do most of the manufacturing for you. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting idea, and I think it's got some legs. But the other thing I'm trying to do is have the charging circuitry on board and controlled by the ESC, and then put a USB Type-C port on the body, either at the back as a fake tailpipe, or actually pointing down. So you can actually charge it just by plugging it in via USB. And also look into wireless charging. So as I said, I'm planning to put copper on the bottom and of course have like a silk screen over the top. But there's two things you can do with that. If you shape it correctly and put it into a coil, you can do wireless charging with the RC cars, which I think is rather nice. The other thing you can do is if you have strips of copper on the bottom, you can actually have contacts embedded in the ground such that when the car goes over them, it starts charging up. There's some maths you have to do so it doesn't short circuit the vehicle, but that's one other possibility, so that when you go to drive the car in, it starts charging automatically, either via direct contact or wireless. And I'm tending towards wireless because it's a bit more flexible and there's less electrocution or less potential to damage the circuitry. But I think that's also another great way to get into the hobby, because then you don't need to buy a charger. So once you start to do the custom stuff like this, and I just lost a light again, you can see all the harsh lightings come back. Once you start to do stuff like this, everything gets a lot cheaper. The upfront costs become a lot less. So a battery charger is not cheap. I want to say 80 AUD. So that's probably about 40-50 USD. And for someone just getting into the hobby, that's kind of a surprise. You don't really want to pay that, especially when you can just get the vehicle to charge itself. And I mean, you've got all the CPU power on board to be able to do that. The other thing I want to try and do is incorporate the ESC. Keep the radio separate so you can swap out radio units and change protocols, but have the ESC take on more duties such as charging, because when it's charging it's not doing much else, so it's not going to impact performance. So that's looking better. I just had the motor too low. Once I swap it around and have it high, it actually just quite easily clears that gear in the middle. Awesome. Yeah, I've got to remember the camera isn't up nearly as high as I thought it was. So yeah, so Qi charging, as it's known, it's pronounced CHI, but when you see it written in the literature, it'll be QI, and QI is actually Chinese, but that's the #1 charging standard. So I think innovations like that would mean that you only need to get the car built and you need a body for it. So the wheels, body, tires, and everything you'd purchase from your normal location. You buy the chassis from a PCB house or from a manufacturer like myself directly. And then all you need is a transmitter. And that means your costs to enter the hobby are significantly reduced. So it's basically how I want to give back to the community and get more people on board. So we'll finish this step. We're going to move on to the next one. This is going to need more parts. Now, I don't know whether these extra golden gears they're referencing are, so I'm assuming it's probably these. Definitely does look like them. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I'm literally walking distance from Sydney Harbour Bridge, so... part of the problem I have being in Sydney is there's not a lot of there's no mini-Z places here in Sydney, and there's not a lot of RC activity either. So that's kind of annoying. I have to make my own fun, essentially. Oh, New Zealand. Oh, I would so love to go back to New Zealand at the moment. Man, that is such a nice country. I went driving around on the North Island, and I'll never forget the experience because I was with a friend who likes to drive very, very fast. And he's a good driver. And I'm not talking about uncontrollably fast. It was just a bit faster than most people would be comfortable with. But we were rushing back to the hotel, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning through the mountains where there were sheer drops of like 20 meters on one side of the road and stone on the other. And it was a very, very tight road, and there was fog everywhere. and it was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. As I said, I'll never forget that. I was in New Zealand for linux.conf.au. That was a good time. Yeah, the car scene in New Zealand is pretty crazy, as I'm sure Mighty Car Mods will attest to. Those Mighty Car Mods guys are really, really nice. I've been to their garage once before. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't realise who they were, but now I know who they are. I definitely recommend New Zealand, especially during this entire COVID era. Man, their ability to tackle the entire COVID thing was pretty crazy. Hats off to your Prime Minister. She's pretty awesome. Unlike our Prime Minister, who is a corrupt piece of... I'm not going to finish that sentence. So it must be the plastic gears I use here. They say brass gear and spur gear. Motor pinion. Maybe I've actually got this wrong. Maybe I was supposed to use a motor pinion and not the brass gear there. Which means I'm going to have to pull this all apart again. Oh, this mouse. Oh, you should see the mouse I actually normally use. I typically use a ball mouse. But I stopped using it because it's not the best for first-person shooters. And I'm not talking about first-person shooters like Battlefield or anything like that. It's just anything the first-person perspective. Oh, ScoMo, he is a corrupt piece of... He's literally our Australian version of Trump. Yeah, some of the stuff he's done is absolutely mind-boggling. The only person I know of who, when the entire country was on fire, went to Hawaii for a holiday. And then, didn't even apologize for it and had to have, his cabinet actually had to call him back. And even then, he delayed that coming back by a couple of days. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. There was something in Parliament just recently where he turned his back on the opposition when they were talking about the budget and making their speech and presenting their budget. And then he took a phone call, in the middle of Parliament. I've got no respect for someone who does that. So let's work out what gears we're going to use. Do we want to reduce it and by how much? So we want the big gear to the little gear. No, we want the little gear going up to the big gear. Okay. Oh, yeah. That entire handshaking thing. Or my favorite one is kissing babies and shaking hands when COVID was brand new. Yeah, we had a pretty bad politician before, but I think we traded bad for even worse. But that said, our state's response to COVID was pretty much what saved us from COVID, I think. So one of the interesting things is at the federal level, they didn't really do anything because Scott Morrison doesn't know what he's doing. But at least our states sort of filled in the gap where he wasn't doing his job. Of course, he's taking credit for it, but... So what's been interesting during this entire period is the shipping from China. It's actually been pretty good. So, funny enough, China's sort of gotten over the coronavirus as far as I can tell. I might not be getting all the information, but it seems like most of it, or a lot of Asia has sort of got it under control, mainly through isolation. And the good thing about that is it means I can be ordering parts from all over Asia and they don't get quarantined. Whereas any package I try and get from the US is delayed by a month to 6 weeks. Shipping from the US to Australia has always been hideously expensive, slow and horrible. And it's one of the reasons why I don't like buying from the US. But it's even worse now. I've had all the packages I've had gone missing have all been from the US or Germany. Although in Germany's case, in their defense, it's more that they contacted me and said, yeah, we just can't ship to you. Okay, I'm gonna need a bit smaller gear though. Yeah, it really, the shipping's been ultra good. Like, you still get the occasional delay, but I've got a feeling it enters the country and then stays sitting on the pallets for 2 weeks to allow the viruses to die and basically be a basic quarantine. And so I've got way too many packages coming from RC Mart at the moment, and I suspect the package I was expecting to come today is just still sitting in quarantine at the moment. Does that clear it? No, that's going to go further back. Oh, man, these builds are so fiddly. It's worth the extra effort, but man, do you not want to do it. Really need to probably fab up some tools or something. What I need for that actually is, can I find it? It's not that one, not that one, or that one. Oh, here we go. So a wheel nut tightener. Allows me to apply pressure on the outside of the gear and push it in a bit. Perfect. So now there's a bit of a silver bit on there. I actually don't sell anything yet. I'm currently designing stuff. So an RC rally, like a Dakar style rally truck. And I'm not talking about like the four-wheel drive, like the UDR, Traxxas UDR equivalent or anything like that, which we'd call a ute over here. So 4 wheels, normal size car with a flatbed on the back. I'm talking about like an actual truck, like a shipping truck thing. So that's first on my agenda, and then I've been working on an LED light kit for Mini Z's. That's a bit more advanced than anything you've seen so far. So one of the innovations in that space I'm bringing is wireless control via Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And the reason why the Wi-Fi is good is because it then allows you to program in your own light animations. And it's just a bit easier to control. It means you don't need a special custom app or anything, which is nice because I work as a site reliability engineer, which is a cross between programmer and systems administrator. And so a web interface makes it very, very easy for me to whip up automation to control like an entire fleet of cars if I wanted to. Because as people keep on pointing out, I'm somewhat crazy in some of the stuff I both claim to do and then end up doing. But then again, sanity is definitely overrated. I told myself after I got a double lung transplant that I was just going to go off and just, rather than people telling me, no, you can't do that, just go off and do the stuff I want to and then not worry about what other people are saying. And this Mini Z hobby has definitely been one. I've purchased way too many Mini Z cars, but I have so much fun building them. Unfortunately, I don't get enough time to race them, and that's just due to my job stealing so much from my own personal time. What's ride with lenses? Yeah, the light kit, I'm not going to lie, is pretty insane. So I'm actually using tricolor programmable LEDs, these things here. And in fact, I've got some that are 4-color, and I can make any color light I want. So I just slap these behind the headlights and the indicator lights or whatever, and then I could have green indicator lights if I wanted to. Actually, funnily enough, the reason I haven't been posting for the last couple of weeks or done much on building this or the light kit is I've actually been doing some bike building, which is my other hobby. Ah, interesting. I'll have to go have a look at that. The other thing, do I have one of them near me? No. So one of the nice things about the light kit I'm developing is it's a pre-built commercial box, and I just provide the software for it. And that little light unit itself only costs, like the CPU, only costs $10. That's $10 USD. It's actually slightly less than that, but once you factor in shipping, it's about that. So it really, like the other thing I'm trying to do is reduce costs, because if you have a look at programmable light kits online, they're just so expensive, and I personally find if you have to install an app, that's more effort than I want to go to. But the other thing I want to do is, like, it's going to be possible to plug the light kit into the MR3VE port for the ICS connector. And so via the web interface, I want to make it so you can actually program the Mini Z ESC settings. Because I always really hate having to have an adapter, and I find the Bluetooth adapter doesn't work. And the USB adapter, getting that to work with the Kyosho software is just such a pain in the ass. So I know how to reverse engineer the protocol, I've just got to go sit down and do it. Yeah, so the light kit, there are some videos I've got up where I've reverse engineered the iBus protocol, and I've got a working prototype of it. And I need to work on S-Bus next. But with the NB4 receivers, I can quite easily make it all configurable and triggered by the remote, but I can also make it trigger a whole bunch of actions from the remote. So it's not like you have simple on-off, like I could have timer-based stuff and and or ors, or like full logic. I write it all in Python, so there'll be a nice like drag and drop interface, but if you want to get real deep and do some customization, you'll be able to write your own custom scripts for it. So, okay, so that's looking better. We're back to here now. So we've got the center shaft. One side has a brass gear and the other one has a spur gear. So we're going to put the brass gear on first and just tighten up loosely. I am interested in doing the light kits as well. I have been watching some of K-pop RC's stuff. I must admit, I find him particularly grating at the beginning of the video, and that's why I have to put some effort into watching his stuff, but after like 5 minutes I just don't care anymore. But he does have some pretty awesome builds. It's the wrong one, it's under this one here. I've also been thinking about bodies, because I have to design the RC rally truck body, and I'm currently trying to work out how to actually do that. I might actually have to fire up Blender or some other 3D design software and design the body in that rather than via CAD software. That doesn't go on easily. Why is that? Maybe we should start with the spur gear. So let's see how this all goes in. So there is... Now that's interesting. That actually interferes with the top there. So maybe I do have to go down, which is even more annoying. Let me look at the distance. Yeah, I've actually got to drop the servo again. Okay, I'm going to call this step the most annoying that I've encountered so far. But then again, I'm having a lot more fun chatting as well, so... This is why I've been trying to do the live streams, is so that people can just jump on and chat about the Mini Z stuff and life in general. Trying to think about... So I've been watching a lot of the rally racing on YouTube lately. If you're interested in that sort of stuff, I've been watching some of the stuff like the SoCal rally races. But most of the good stuff actually comes out of Europe. And the rally racing is, well, the rally running I should call it, is kind of awesome, because you have a really, really nice long track that's really, really curvy, but you don't stand on the one spot and drive the car around it. The track is so large that you actually have to run after the car itself. So that sounds like a lot of fun. And I've been doing a lot of bike riding on the weekends to get into shape to be able to do that sort of thing. I'm actually a pretty big big bike rider, so on the weekends I've had to make the choice, like, do I do RC stuff and go out and drive, or do I go do like a 30 or 40 kilometer bike ride? And normally the bike ride actually ends up winning. So, and unfortunately at the moment, you probably can't see it, I've got the track down here at the moment, but I've got all my bike parts laid on it, so I need to chuck a whole lot of that stuff in the bin and clean up my track so I can drive. Because one of the things I did actually take, I did pick up was some HDPE plastic sheets that are about 2 meters by 1 meter. So I've got 2 of them for about a 2 meter by 2 meter track. And that's ultra low friction plastic. So it's almost the same plastic as the LF4 tires. And I've now got the knockoff RCP track, and now I've got an actual dedicated drift surface as well. And I must admit, like, it's been interesting. So I've now been able to run a drift vehicle on both types of track, and the settings you need for the two are very, very different. You need different toe in, toe out on high grip RCP versus the HDPE sheets. And your power delivery and your throttle curves need to be slightly different as well. And like one of the big things I do with tuning my remotes is making sure I dial in the throttle curves, because I tend to find that gives me the most control, is just nailing that properly. Hard parts, it's a cool stream. Drift Evolutions, you know, I think that's actually come up in my recommendations just recently. I might have to give that another go. Why won't you go in? There we go. So I've also, like, I also had the Kyosho 4x4 out earlier. I'm doing a custom build on that. And I've also got another chassis that's completely stock. So I need to play around with the stock one a bit more. Not modify it, but actually like take it out driving. I was actually planning this weekend to go off and do some outdoor crawling. Because if you have a look at my early videos, one of the things I really enjoyed was just going to random locations and driving. And then editing the footage to be really, really nice. And I started going for this hands with this talking head, basically because to produce a video like this is significantly lower effort, and that editing those videos would actually take me several hours, and it was quite painful. And unfortunately these days I don't actually have a lot of free time on my hands. Like, I make enough money that I can just buy mini Zs as I want, but not enough. But it means I don't have enough time to actually drive them whenever I want. So I've been very, very seriously considering dropping down to part-time just to have a better work-life balance. Which you would not believe how important that is. Yeah, that does still feel like... That is definitely still catching. But I should be able to address that purely by shaving some parts down. But I mean, it's working for the moment, so I think we'll just continue. And then what I'll do is I'll come back off stream and either fix that or have another video on just tuning and tweaking this all up. Yeah, so I don't think I like that part too much. Any Mini Z suppliers in Australia? Yes, but I don't buy from them. So there was Northern Beaches Hobby Centre, who on their website, they say they have a lot of parts, and then I would order them, and then they would say, oh, sorry, we don't have that part in stock. And I actually went to their actual place of business, and what it turns out, it was actually pretty simple. The owner is just really, really big into Mini Zs, and no one was buying the Mini Zs at the time, and so he just took a whole lot of parts home, which... to be honest, I can completely understand that. I thought it was funny, if anything else, but that was before Mini Zs got this popular. But I actually buy most of my stuff off RC Mart. They just have the best prices in the area. And there's a pretty horrible markup if you buy locally. The other nice thing about being in Australia, or more specifically Sydney, is shipping from Japan is normally free. So if I want to get bodies, you have to be a bit careful when buying from Japan, and that's because the prices vary quite a bit. But if you find a good deal, you don't have to worry about shipping, which is normally where it kills you. Oh, this is... I see what you mean. This is just stupidly difficult. Going to have to be very, very careful here that I don't bend anything. Yeah, so I can actually see plastic came off then, so it's extremely tight. But yeah, I'm not paid by RC Mart at all. I mean, if they want to sponsor me, I'm all ears. But RC Mart is actually pretty awesome for the Asian region. Yeah, so like I effectively pay local prices because I don't have to pay for shipping. I do have to hunt around a bit, but I'm fine with that. We're gonna have to grip this lightly just to pull it off. Or maybe I can. Oh, there. I had to just twist it a bit. It was a bit off center. The other thing I managed to pick up was 2D Nano chassis. Now, if you go on to eBay Japan at the moment, one thing I think confuses a lot of the Japanese sellers is the conversion rates, because all their prices are 10 times normal market rate. So someone was selling a D Nano for $2,000. Now, it was a fairly complete set with batteries and everything, but $2,000 is way overpriced. I paid $200 for one of my D Nanos and $400 for the other one. So that's why I keep on thinking they're off by a factor of 10, and it's completely understandable. When I actually did go to Japan, I actually ended up misconverting the values by tenfold as well, or an order of magnitude. I just had the trade rate incorrect. Actually, I was looking at some wheels, and then I realized these are all custom. RC Mart is now selling BM Racing stuff, and they've got all the different... I didn't realize BM Racing has like 3 different styles of rims, so it might be a great place to start if you're looking for the exact same adjustable offset rims. I don't know how I'm going to get that on. Let's try a bit of brute force. Yeah, that's working. Slowly. They're MR03 compatible rims, but they're variable offset. So they use a really, really unique offset system, which is pretty crazy. So you can see it's like that, and then you push it, and then you rotate the wheel. Or actually, I'll show you from the inside. So if I can put it up on camera, you see how there's 3 little indents there at different depths. And then if you look at the wheel itself, you'll see it's got these little indents that go into it. Actually, what other rims do I have? I don't have them handy. I picked up some really nice steel rims recently, but I'll have to go have a look at those rims. So yeah, you can go like really, really like that, or all the way to that. So more of a deep dish style. So configurable offset, I can't actually remember how you hold them in place like that, whether or not you glue them. But I thought this is probably one of the better rim designs I've seen. PN Racing is also doing some interesting stuff with rims, mainly in the racing space. But how far does that go in? That goes in like that, so that should be fine. Once again, the steering rod is getting in the way. Just want to make sure I've got my gear meshes correctly. No, okay, so I need a different size gear here. Yeah, I'm interested in how good the flanges are in practice. That's a bit of a mystery to me, whether or not it's a gimmick. Because as much as I don't like to admit it, there's a lot of gimmicky stuff in the Mini Z world, and I've fallen victim to a lot of it. Actually, this isn't a gimmicky thing, but it was one interesting thing I noted. So, BMR Racing was doing a comparison between metal versus other parts like plastic, and trying to dispel the myth that metal parts are heavier. The only problem was that he ended up using premium metal parts and not something like Eagle Racing parts. And I know for a fact the Eagle Racing parts do weigh significantly more than the metal parts, whereas the parts he were using were like ultra high-end lightened metal parts that were lighter because they removed extra material. So it's like I always go back to that because it always reminds me that like it's very much buyer beware, and you have to know what question you're actually asking before you try and answer things. Really? Now, unfortunately, I haven't been able to get enough race experience in to be affected by traction roll. As I said, there's no clubs in Sydney. But I'm actually interested to see how that works out in practice. Well, okay, so that really does not mesh well. Is there a smaller gear? There is a smaller gear. Then why do they give you these ones? That's a spur gear. I'm a bit confused by these gears, in all honesty. Maybe I'm just using the wrong ones, but it would be kind of nice if they had specified teeth counts. At least this one goes back on easily. Okay, it acts as similar to how people you glue the sidewall. Ah, okay. Ah, right. Traction roll. What am I thinking? Yeah. I swear, I can't believe how easy it is for me to forget words entirely. I was warned about that might be a possibility, but it still surprises me to this day. As I mentioned earlier, I've had a double lung transplant, and I'm on some very, very heavy medication. And unfortunately, it does affect some of your mental clarity and your ability to remember things. And given my job relies on me remembering things, it's kind of surprising that I do as well as I do. Cool. Oh, all is fine. You should have seen me before the double lung transplant. Like, I find in all honesty, with everything I've been through, the double lung transplant was so mundane and boring. It was not funny. So what people don't realize is if you go in for a double lung transplant, you're, at least in Australia, you're out back on the streets in 10 days or less. So you're in for a week minimum and about 10 days maximum. It's a pretty straightforward process here in Australia. And unlike in the US, I didn't have to pay a cent for it, which I'm eternally grateful for because that's normally like a $200,000 operation. And the aftercare support that I get from the Australian medical system is phenomenal. To the point where they'll even ring you up on a regular basis just to check in and see how you're doing. Which is kind of nice. And like the nurses and everything actually do care quite a bit, so... I've got nothing but good words for the Australian medical system. It's one of the reasons why I kind of liked it when the universal healthcare in the US came out. Like, Australia has a system like that, and you don't realise how good it is until you really, really, really need it. But before the lung transplant, I was significantly worse, so I used to have to do like 2 hours worth of medication and exercise per day just to stay healthy. And then that swapped to like a couple of pills, and now I don't have to think about it. Yeah, in fact, I had an incredibly good transplant, so I might have been out in 6 or 7 days. Um, the transplant for me just went that well. They got me that good a match. So, yep, I can attest to that. And I know for a fact that New Zealand and Australia have a shared two-way medical agreement, which is really, really good because when I went to linux.conf.au, that was one of the factors for the reason for me going over there, knowing that if I needed to get healthcare, it would have been the exact same conditions as if I'm in Australia, and I just have to go to hospital and the fees are handled in the exact same way. I wouldn't have had to have paid a cent, which is really helpful for travel insurance because it makes travel insurance basically cost nothing. And it was actually kind of funny because I almost didn't need it while I was over there. So, yeah, everything's fine. I mean, like, you've got to keep in mind, I'm in year 3 of my, or even possibly year 4 of my double lung transplant. And if you get to that point, things are pretty fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to hit retirement, but that's fine because, as I said, I'll stop doing work and just start racing mini Zs and starting my own business and just living the life how I want to. And I definitely think that's important. Actually, as a side note, so I handle a lot of hiring for my company. And don't worry, this isn't an ad for my company at all. But it does mean I get to see a lot of experienced people with a lot of experience, as well as very, very people new to the industry directly out of university. And the one thing I try and get across and make sure they watch is the work-life balance. Because especially if you're new, coming directly out of university, it's very easy to want to do everything. And then the problem is that 4 or 5 years down the track, you're stuck in the wrong mindset about how you approach work. And you end up working too hard in your own spare time. And that's not a fun place to be. But back to contributing to the community. So, and this all came back from reassessing my priorities in life and working out what I wanted to do. So there are some other factors that got me into Mini Z. It wasn't the double lung transplant. It was some other stuff that came, some other unfortunate news that came for other family members. But I'm not going to go into that. But one thing I want to do is, as I said, there's no clubs in Australia. I kind of want to get to the point, now that I've reassessed my priorities, where I can open up a Mini Z club in Australia. There used to be one in Chatswood, which is a couple of train stops from me. It was rather big and rather popular, so I know the concept can work. I've got a feeling the way to make it work, the racing club work, is to keep costs low and have as many different revenue streams as possible. So this is where I hope to be able to leverage the custom chassis and whatnot. But the other thing I'd want to do is open a coffee store. So coffee and RC cars. That's what I'd like to do. And basically help a lot of people who are currently suffering quite badly. So I've got a lot of friends, some who have lost their jobs and others who have had pretty massive medical issues and everything. And after chatting with him, especially for people my age, like there's not a lot of support networks or help. So I'm about, how old am I now? I'm probably about 35. So there's a lot of support networks for older people, and there's a lot of people for between 20 to 30, so younger adults, but not for my age group. And this is about the time that some people have midlife crises or start to have them. And I thought that, hey, maybe having a racing thing and just sort of a social mini Z RC type thing may be a way to tackle that, as well as actually having other people to race against. So it's not entirely selfless, but, try and make the most of what you've got. Yeah, RC and coffee. So basically if the RC stuff, because you're not going to have RC stuff all day, right? Like 9 o'clock in the morning, no one's going to be racing RC cars. Midday, well, maybe we'll get some crowd from the lunch crowd, but first thing in the morning, people want coffee. Lunchtime, people want coffee. And then you can use the coffee to entice them to try out the RC stuff out the back, right? And I've seen a lot of RC car places, and the food situation is kind of bad. But I'm figuring I might be able to change that. You know, offer some all-right-ish food, some great coffee, drinks and everything, and try and do it at reasonable prices instead of price gouging. Then out the back have not massive tracks, but some smallish tracks and gathering areas out the back. And that could be a pretty awesome type of setup. And the other thing is, and this is going to sound, maybe it won't sound as off as I think it does, but given the current climate with, why are there no holes there? Ah, wow, I actually put that on back to front. A lot of businesses are closing. So this is actually a prime opportunity to get a shop and either purchase a shop or lock in very, very cheap lease prices. Like I'd actually like to buy a place, because one of the big problems with Sydney is the rent is crazy. There was a point in the last couple of years where it was the most expensive place to live in the world. And the amount of rent I pay scares people. And these are people living in New York. They're blown away at just how expensive it is. So if I can get a commercial place with a normal, so like a coffee place with normal property upstairs, I think I would be kind of set. And then that gives me the flexibility that if the coffee store is not going well and the RC stuff is, I can just pivot around and focus on that. But to be honest, if you're running a coffee store in Sydney, you're pretty much set. Like it's pretty much a money-making business. There is a lot of competition, but that said, if you're making good coffee, you don't have to make the best coffee, you just have to make good enough coffee. One of the reasons for that is coffee places get busy, and if you're empty, people will just flock to you if they're having to wait too long. Okay, I'm gonna have to use these then. I keep on misplacing my wheel tighteners, like these things. But yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, more long term, like I'm not going to be doing my job forever. Anyone working in IT has a shelf life, and unfortunately that shelf life is incredibly short. So I really have to start thinking beyond that, and a coffee store just seemed like a nice thing to do. And so did the social club aspect, like that's pretty awesome. Oh man, this screws a lot longer than I thought it was. Okay. One of the interesting things about this build has just been how long it's taken to actually build it. It seems really quick, but in practice I found it really hasn't been. Like I haven't been able to get a lot done per session. Oops. Oh wow, it's 10 o'clock already. Which means this better be like nearing the last instruction, because I don't want to have to do too many. Okay, next is body posts and wheels, which I'm going to do off stream, I'll be completely honest. Because I want to wire up the electronics, but I do have some comments on the electronics that I do want to make. So I need to 3D print off some parts, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in a moment. I mean, if anyone's seen my DRZ-V2 build, I've had a lot of comments on just how incredibly clean the electronics were on that. And I kind of want to do that on this board as well. So let me just unscrew this and I'll start pointing at things. Okay. So I see a lot of people do the wiring for this. Like that, going over the top and then routing to wherever, perhaps off to the side and then coming down the side there like that. So that's a fairly clean job, but I'm thinking about coming around down to either through the gap here and then out the side here, and then, let's see, running along like that to the ESC. But I want to 3D print some bracing things to actually hold these cables along the entire length. So I need to get the resin printer up and running again for that. I've had the 3D printers for a while and haven't been making much use of them. Why is it back to back? Is it because... That's actually interesting. Why didn't that work if I put it the other way around? Was there a clip or a clasp? Yeah, I should have just been able to reverse that. Yeah, I've had the 3D printers for a while, and it's just rather unfortunate that I haven't made more use of them until now. But they're a bit of a maintenance bird, and I haven't had a really good place to put them, so I need a dedicated area for that. Like, the resin printing is actually pretty dangerous. No, I haven't made any resin wheels, but I've been thinking about it. I actually purchased toughened resin, so it's resin that's stronger than normal. And I found that it's very, very brittle, but for drifting wheels and probably racing wheels would be fine. But it is very, very strong, that toughened resin. Well, the other thing is I got perfectly clear toughened resin. The reason I went for clear is I spent a lot of time looking at the different resins, and one of the things that does seem to keep on popping up is if you're using a non-clear resin, then the potential for the inside to not have hardened is pretty high. So even if you make the part solid, it may not actually ever be solid. Like, it may feel like there's nothing moving around internally, but the inside can be just completely liquid. So you're getting none of the extra strength from that. But the toughened resin, I printed off some parts, and that was very, very robust. I put that through a lot of stress tests, and I did eventually fracture it when I dropped the 300 grams from it from a height of 2 meters, and I had one part chip off very, very, very cleanly. Okay. But I've been focusing on the CAD and the CAM stuff so that I can go off and print stuff. I chose, well, the completely clear resin looks pretty awesome, so I tend to just leave it all clear. I do have an airbrush that I picked up, and I do need to start airbrushing stuff. I've been painting all my 1/10 scale RC car bodies, and I'm about to move on to spray painting my SD Racing bodies for like the B2B chassis I've got, which is a 3-wheeler mini Z car, and their pan car equivalent and some of the other stuff. Just because those bodies are vacuum formed and are actually pretty detailed. Yeah. Oh, SD Racing has some pretty crazy stuff. So the other thing, I don't know if you saw my last video, but I also have a Kyosho Phantom that I just did the electronics for recently. And this thing's a lot of fun as well. So it's a chain belt there. So been playing around with that this week, which has been great. Oh, 1/10 scale drift. What chassis are you using there? I'm not building a 1/10 scale drift car. I need to make sure I remember that. But funny enough, the XV01 Tamiya chassis can do drift if I put drift tires on it. And I've got my late father's Tamiya RC cars, and I'm in two minds about whether or not I sell them or just go all in with the drifting on those. So I have found that drifting the 1/10 scale cars is an order of magnitude easier than the Mini Z cars, and it kind of blew me away. Oh, that's nice. Very, very nice setup there. I must admit, I've got a lot of YouTube channels in my subscription list that are just drift channels. Is it that Neo J guy who he hangs around a lot on R Drifting on Reddit? His stuff is incredible. Is that the right way around? No, that's the wrong way around. How he edits his videos is crazy, crazy, crazy good. Yeah, so the big thing that makes 1/10 scale drifting so much easier is that the drift happens over a longer period of time. And that alone makes certain things a lot easier. Where the complexity comes from is putting the car where you want it. That seems to be the case. I don't have enough experience drifting to be able to say that, but that Phantom actually drifts fairly nicely, especially when I've got it on 3S, which people tell me putting a pan car on 3S is somewhat insane because they're normally 1S and 2S at most. And I had no idea because I tried to find information on pan cars and I couldn't find a lot. But you put it on 3S and you can get the back out very, very nicely and very, very predictably. And honestly, like, I didn't feel the need for a gyro. Like, even on the 1/28th scale cars, well, so the 1/28th scale cars on the RCP, I don't feel the need for a gyro. On the HDPE surface, I could definitely see why you'd want it, but I'm still inclined to practice without the gyro. Or at least only a light bit of gyro until I get better. The challenge for me is drifting without the gyro, so... Cool, I think we can put that on now. Do I want to tighten that anymore? No, that's probably fine. But I'm getting into rock bouncing and RC rally. And the RC rally... so that Neo J guy I was talking about earlier, he covered the SoCal rally races. So the drift guy actually got me into Tamiya RC rally racing. I also saw that some people are just putting the drift tires on it, and I've got all the because of those cars I mentioned earlier, those drift cars. I do have the drift tires available, so I might have the rally car just pull double duty. So how does that go on? That needs the countersunk. These ones, and I also need to tighten the screw on here. But I think I first need to force that in a bit further. I'm just a bit hesitant as to how that's going to happen. So let's move the servo to the side here. Oh, actually that doesn't want to come out. That's interesting. Okay, I might have made this exceptionally difficult for myself. How am I going to do this? No, XV01. I considered the TT02, but I saw the XV02 was newer, and I went once again, like, the benefits of my job allowed me to just basically go out with the chassis, and buy like whatever part I wanted. So it's mainly stock with the long wheelbase extras, so the long shock extras. So I get extra shock travel. And some strengthened parts, but not too many. So I went for the carbon embedded nylon reinforced parts. And what else? Some steering arm improvements, and that's about it. Some third-party shocks. I went with G-Made shocks that were fully adjustable, which were a step beyond what most people put on that vehicle, but I like the ability to adjust the damper, so I think I can just leave yeah. So it's damaging the brass a bit, but not too much, so like make it flat, grip it, force it down, and that's going in. Perfect. So, do I have it handy? I've got, if you hadn't guessed, I've got very, very expensive tastes. I'm not going to lie, I make quite a bit of money from my job because I'm very, very good at what I do. I'm using a Tekin RS Pro Black. So that'll give me about 400 amps per phase. I could have gone with something cheaper, but I like the adjustable drag brake and a lot of the other features on here. And I kind of like having the same... I made the mistake of going with Taken for my first buggy, and I like to keep my hardware the same across all the vehicles. So that means I can use the same programming port and I don't have to buy multiple connectors and have multiple pieces of software and everything. So I just decided to go with Taken again, with a Taken 412 element, so a semi-waterproof 4-slot, 4-pole 12-slot stator. So it's got a lot of torque. It's actually a crawler motor, but because the KVs are the same, it just means it's got a lot more torque than the standard motor. So it should be able to get off the line and handle the dirt very, very, very well. Actually, I don't even think it's a crawler motor. I believe it's actually a short course truck motor, but it's in a 550 motor. I also have a couple of hobby wing fusions because I've got a big crawler or two, and I'm going to be putting that in those ones because I didn't have enough room for an ESC. So I guess maybe I do use different ESCs. For the racing stuff, I definitely like the Taken because, especially at the low, like I've done a couple of comparisons between different ESCs. So they're a good hobby wing, a cheap hobby wing, and a Taken. And the Taken seems to win out at control and smoothness at the low RPM range. And with the RC car rally stuff, I see a lot of people putting just high turn motors and going very, very fast in it, and then not being at full throttle, or if you put full throttle in, you don't take off any further because you spin the tires. So I figure better low-end control is actually probably what I want, and then if I need to, I can double the KV to something like 4,000, which is what a lot of people are running, but that actually feels a bit too fast. And the more I play rally games, because I do stream on Twitch and I play Dirt 2.0 and The Art of Rally, I'm actually kind of enjoying the aspect of it's not an understanding that rally is not just about going like full throttle all the time. That's what I was looking for. So let's see if we can leave this back in somehow. There we go. Perfect. And then this will go on here, and we should probably screw this in before I forget. And kind of determine what our wheelbase is going to be. So I just need to, let's see, these 4 screws. And I'm probably going to run the rally off a 2S Shorty LiPo and get rid of the horrible Tamiya connections and go with an XT60. One of the things I didn't realize is that Tamiya hasn't really updated their product range in like 10 years. So while every other manufacturer brings out like a chassis per year, the Tamiya stuff has been very, very rock solid for years on end now. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. If anything, it seems like rather than do an update of a chassis, they just release a completely new chassis. And I don't know if I like that. Okay. But from what I've seen from the XV01, it looks like a pretty capable chassis. Considering how long it came out after the TT01 and TT02, and considering they all came out in like 2010, I don't know why people still go for the TT01 and TT02. I've had a look at a couple of videos to see why that is, but I haven't really seen a good explanation of why that's the case. So that has to go in further still. So I mean, if you've got any insight into that cheddar cheese, let me know, because I'd love to know what the real, like why even now people are still going with those chassis compared to the XV01. When the XV01 definitely seems to be like a dedicated rally chassis. Okay, we're getting there, come on. Luckily there's a notch in the actual bottom plate here that I can line the top gold one to, so it's taking out a bit of the guesswork here in my alignment. Cool, and then I can bump that out if needed. Let's move that cable out of the way. Hope that I put the right bearings in. Oh, that's a tight fit. I actually wonder if they stiffened this drivetrain for some reason due to design issues. Let's compact that off stream. Okay, getting there. Let's push a bit further. Oh, and that clicked in, so that's good. So this is definitely not the smoothest drivetrain. Why is that? I'm definitely catching on something. Did I get that spur gear incorrect? I think I did. Yeah, see, my problem with the, funnily enough, with the TT02 is it seemed like people had to do a lot of upgrades to get them to where they needed to be. So I saw someone who was talking about the XV01. So I just need to make sure I've got my spur sizes correct. And then they were doing like, so someone had a fully modified TT02, and then they had an XV01, and they were close. But if you consider that you had to modify the TT02 just to get to base XV01 specs, and I'm sure an XV01 is slightly better, but to be honest, it doesn't need much in the way of modification. That's pulling that out in a way I don't really like. Then I don't know why you go with anything but an XV01. Like, from memory, the prices were about the same as well, so... I think we're just going to go with the Titan drive chain because I want to get this sort of done, and I've got other things I need to get done tonight, so I'm going to have to do some stuff off stream, but most of that's just going to be electronics. And I might even do an on-video or non-stream electronics video because I think people might be interested in my process of doing soldering and how I go about planning these things. Because my eyesight is also not particularly good at this time of night. So when I'm soldering, I actually do it pretty blind. Like, I can only just make out the actual solder joints. And I tend to get very, very bad handshakes, but I've got tricks to work around that. And I've had some questions about how I solder with hands that are shaking all over the place like that. Okay, so let's screw this in as well. So I keep on having to remind myself I've got to force the screw in initially to cut into the plastic. But once you do, oh god, it slides in nicely. I really love the plastic they used on this kit. Like, I can't understate how good it is. So I actually have a WL Toys 989, and I saw Garage IC just reviewed it recently. Originally I was going to try and build a very, very small rally car out of that, and I still plan to, but I was kind of shocked at the amount of work you have to do to make that performant. Kind of makes me appreciate Mini Zs more and more. I know they get called out as hideously expensive, but that's normally by people who don't own anything in this scale and realize how difficult it is. Okay, so that's the chassis looking better. I'm still getting some... Oh, that's because that hasn't gone all the way in. Still, it's sort of clicking a bit, so it's definitely not smooth. So I've definitely got wrong gears here. But the problem with this manual is it doesn't tell you what teeth gears you should put where. So that's a tad bit annoying. I'm going to put the body posts on off video, but I'll be doing that when I'm doing the soldering. So... I'm kind of glad it did come with magnetic bodies because I'm going to be converting everything I own to magnetic bodies. Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's not a bad vehicle, but there's just so much calibration you have to do to get it working. But anyway, I'm going to call it a night here. Definitely thanks for joining me. I have had a request to do the adjustable body plate on the GLD. So I'm probably going to try and aim to do that on Thursday, time permitting. Otherwise it'll be on the Friday. And it'll probably be about the same time, so sometime after 8:30. And I hopefully should be able to get some soldering done on this chassis by then, so we'll be able to show it off. And maybe even some driving footage, because I'd like to start introducing my casual drifting and driving streams on Saturday or Sunday, so I can get back into actually driving a bit more. So thanks for joining me. Keep on building, everyone, and I hope to see you soon. Good night.